in terms of COVID-19, so in England, we particularly found within digital, trying to connect people through digital was really tough. And for some people, connecting through technology with their families or to do online banking, all those kind of practical things was really useful. But actually, for a lot of people, they found that creativity and culture and accessing that from their homes was a massive motivator to kind of getting over that skills gap that people had, that getting a chance to do online banking wasn't enough for them to learn the skills to be able to get online, but actually having access to creativity and culture, like you're talking about, was a massive motivator. And then, of course, once you've learned those skills, you're then online and able to access way more than you started off with. So I could talk all day about this because it's something I find absolutely fascinating. And I'm no tech person, so I've got loads of questions. But I'm going to open it up to everybody to kind of ask a wider question around the intersectionality of work. So the question I'm going to ask is what I've been asked to ask, and I'm hoping we're going to go off on some tangents with things afterwards. So how is creative aging helping your sector innovate or transform its systems and practices to meet the needs of older people today? Big question. Does anybody have any immediate thoughts?
I do. First of all, I just want a little brag for my people. During COVID, I'm sorry, it's true though. During COVID, as you know, at least in the US, and I know for my people overseas as well, libraries were one of the first to pivot and provide online programming, online story times, and lots of programming. And I cannot tell you how much response I heard about it. And I can, as you said, I could speak from personal experience. It was the first time my dad asked me about Zoom in my whole life. So because he needed to, you know, that was a way to connect. So yes, I totally agree. In terms of the idea of how about innovating in this sector, I think the most, the mantra I've been using around that is intent versus impact. So in terms of my industry, the biggest thing with seniors, and I'm speaking very anecdotally, was e-readers at Christmas, teaching people, or whatever holiday, people getting a gift of an e-reader and teaching them to use the tech. And that was just the thing everybody talked about. That became the program, along with generally using technology. But with all we've learned about creative aging and the impact on health, the idea of what do we want that impact to be has broadened our understanding. As I mentioned, we partnered with Lifetime Arts to introduce their foundations on demand regarding how to program creative aging for, well, it's for other people other than libraries. I like to think it's just for libraries. But the chat, again, was buzzing around all of the program ideas people were sharing and the importance of what the impact of was more than just connecting to need. So I think that's a big piece of it.
Absolutely. And can anyone else feed into that idea that creativity and culture is bringing something special to the table that may be another way of delivering a service? Yeah, Tom.
I can echo Veronica's point, and also a little bit about what you were talking about before. In some ways, because the tech angle in our sector is, heavily weighted toward people using various devices and connectivity, technology tends to bias toward higher income people and people that are more advantaged and have more resources. And so in order to be inclusive, when we're thinking about inclusivity, we need to find ways that people can engage in a kind of immediately useful way. One of the first questions that people ask when they come to a Senior Planet or OATS is, am I going to be able to learn this? Is it for me? Which is really a kind of challenging. Imagine that the folks that you're working with, the first question is, do I even belong here? And that's what we're often starting with, because technology has been such a battering ram for ageism. And so for us to be able to use creativity as a kind of entry point for people, because people's culture and creativity is so central to their sense of identity and their confidence, it can be a sort of a bridge or a gateway into the whole system. And so, one of the things, a strange little thing we're doing is we're doing online travel right now, which is a chance for people to travel around the world, but they're doing it virtually. And we had a group that visited the Great Wall of China recently. We had about 100 people in the session, and there was a live person giving a tour of the Great Wall. And the people just were over the moon by it. They were participating together. They were getting to see something that was not in their daily lives, but it was such a comfortable and easy way to start to use the tech. And then, of course, now they're all active users of Senior Planet. We use this test where we ask if they would recommend the program, which is they call it Net Promoter Score. And we got a 100 in that session. It was the first time we've ever gotten a perfect score, because people just feel this kinship with creative and cultural experiences, which allows them to focus on, okay, well, are you getting your primary health visits, or are you getting the kind of training for some of the more life requirements that you may need for independent living, which may not be the first things they start with.
And Julie, that kind of thing makes me just automatically think of health, about this battering ram, as Tom says, about ageism within health, that kind of reduction of your identity and your sense of self, and how creativity and culture can bring something else to the table when it comes to health and well-being. Don't know if you can speak something around that, about how you see the transformation working.
Actually, I was thinking, sorry, I'm going to swerve your question slightly, because I was just thinking about what Tom and Verunda were saying, and thinking about technology, but which immediately makes me think about the digital divide, and in the UK, I don't know what the stats are in the US, but for us, the digital divide is really, really strong, and it's a real concern. And that no more did we see that so than during COVID. And I was thinking about what did we do to innovate around that? And so I was thinking about some non-digital innovative solutions, working with, but it does link in with identity. So we worked with some extra care schemes. So that's where older people live and they have access to care, but they have their own front door. We ran a project called Back in the Closet, because we heard a lot of stories and we read research about how a lot of older people, when they move into these schemes, they have to literally go back into the closet. And the care staff there seemed to almost unanimously, through the research, said, no, we have no LGBT people living here. And so we made really simple adjustments, but to ask them to wear rainbow lanyards, for example, which actually has a huge impact. But one of the things we did was we ran some creative sessions, and they couldn't be face-to-face, because obviously these kind of places were the places that were on the hardest lockdown for the whole of COVID. But we had a fantastic artist that worked with people on the telephone and recorded sessions, and then sent people disposable cameras, which they could then send back and get the pictures developed, and made really astoundingly beautiful films about what the experience of lockdown and what it felt like for them. And what the biggest thing that for me in those photos is that there were no people in them, in any of the photographs at all, because these people weren't seeing anybody. There's huge amounts of isolation. So I think that digital technology is yes, wonderful, and I've got 4 teenagers, so they're on it all the time, but we also can innovate in other ways. And just one other quick thing, one thing that during lockdown, we looked at the stats for digital exclusion, and we realized there were tens of thousands of people in Greater Manchester who didn't have access to a mobile phone or the computer, the internet at all. They had a radio and a TV. So we created a thing called Creative Care Kits, and I know loads of people did these. So this is one example of them. But we convened 50 organisations together, 300 volunteers, to deliver packs to 53,000 people who were unable to access any kind of digital technology. And that was about community and convening power. And I think that's innovative, when people come together to do stuff together, and all of those processes like procurement go out the window, because you've just got to do it because you've got a real emergency need to meet. And that for me, that's innovative, and something that we need to learn from in our processes, particularly someone who works within the government, local government system.
Just really quickly, I wanted to kind of dovetail on what you were saying about representation, the importance of representation. As we are all, I'm sure, committed to equity and inclusion with all the programs we talk about in ensuring all parts of our communities are served, ensuring that our organization, in terms of our learning and commitment and even partnerships, reflect that equity too, because it, I can understand what you're saying. The rainbow lanyard probably obviously gave so many people a sigh of relief because it goes back to that issue of trust as well. And not that people aren't trusted, but obviously we all know you have a shorthand with someone who shares certain things with you and how important that is. And if that's not possible, or at the moment within your organization, authentically partnering with groups in your community to be sure that the creative aging is not just happening in the community, but also the organization serving folks as well.
And it's interesting because what I'm hearing from you both is that it's kind of, it's not simply about the creative activities within the programming, but it's the creative ideas, the creative systems, the kind of innovation and thinking that's creative, that is challenging and creating space for different people. And what you're saying there, Veronda, speaks my next question, which very neatly segues through around equity and inclusion for marginalized older people. So those people that really would not be able to access these sectors' services without support. How do you feel that creativity or the creative aging within your work has really lended itself to increasing participation from those who would not have accessed otherwise? Tom, if I come to you, as you've not spoken for a little bit.
Sure, I'm happy to go with that one. So on the equity side here, again, technology has this digital divide. In the United States, there's about roughly 40% of older Americans do not have wireline internet at home. So there's this gigantic disparity based on mostly income, but age drives a lot of the change there and the variables. And when we're looking at using this kind of the area of culture, trying to think about the equity issues, first of all, on the one hand, it's enabled us to do partnerships. So we reach out into communities to try to help them with technology, but there aren't very many community technology centers in America. There's only maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred across the whole country. But you know what there's a lot of? Veronda, there's a lot of libraries, and which
I didn't want to interrupt you, Tom, but I was going to jump in.
I got you there. And so one of the things that the United States has this another disparity in aging that's between urban and rural, and most of the resources for older adults are in the larger cities. And so if you go to rural communities where people tend to be more isolated, the library becomes their one of their principal local cultural institutions, and we need to be able to work to support them in order to be able to bring people in. And so we created a program called licensing, which is a pretty dull name for it, but basically it allows, we have about $10 million worth of curriculum. It's hundreds and hundreds of pages in English and Spanish and Mandarin and on different platforms and different materials. So we created a system where a library or a local community center could get trained to use our materials, and then we license it for free to that entity so that they don't have to create their own materials from scratch, but we also leave enough space in it that they can add their own local content that's relevant for their own cultural and community experiences. And so that program is now operating at 260 locations around the country, and it's helped us bring in a lot of communities that would otherwise be excluded from a lot of the services. And of course, once you get people trained and online and engaged, they're then able to access telemedicine services and access a lot of the home-based services that they need. So that's been a big deal. And then the last part is that the United States for one moment has a subsidy around technology for like the next 2 years. And so there's going to be a lot of money available for for those of you on the call in the US, it's from the Infrastructure Act, and all of the states are about to have some money to help people get online and pay for these things. But we're focused on what happens after that injection of money, because sustainability is critical. So if everybody thinks about digital inclusion as let's just get everybody on a computer and then we're all done, this is a very short term and a very limited impact program. But if you think about digital inclusion as how do we get older people to thrive with technology, getting them online is just the starting point, not the end point. And so getting people to say, well, where are we going with this? How are we creating robust communities? We have a Senior Planet Community Book Club now that's got hundreds of people reading books together online. But that's, again, we're just scratching the surface in amplifying the voices of older people with this technology. And the inclusiveness part of it is extended in terms of the sustainability because of the ability to connect to culture. Without culture, we stop at the technology and we don't get it. We really, there's not really as much purpose to doing this work.
Wow, couldn't have a soundbite that was actually better than the soundbite. Veronda, did you want to say briefly, I'm not sure on the time check how long we've got left on this session, because I just find it fascinating. I could go on all day, but I'll take over the whole conference. Did you have any reflections around equality, marginalized communities, connections, creativity?
Just to echo Tom's comments around the libraries, what I especially appreciate was, I always like to say to my team at work, what's next? It's, sometimes it's like, ta-da, we got this thing there, we got to this point. And we actually had one of those broadband grants for California to get connectivity going. But it is about how do we support people, not just, and I know I said this before, but about connecting to need, but around aspiration, around seeing the Great Wall of China, around, doing things that maybe they've spent their lives working so much, they've not thought about the opportunity to paint or to explore creative writing. So that libraries are a great space to do that, obviously in partnership with great organizations that are here today. But I really like that framing of what happens after we get plugged in.
Mm-hmm. And Julie, I'm going to bring you in here because I know that your program is across the life course, but obviously those people that experience inequality in early years, they're still experiencing inequality in later life. And in many cases, they've accumulated a huge amount of extra inequality and complex intersectional inequality. So, yeah, so over to you. I think, how do you think this plays into your work?
You're absolutely right, Farrell. We know that, so for example, we know that at the moment in Greater Manchester, something like 12% of boys aren't school ready. And school ready is like a polite term for saying they're probably still in nappies, they may never have cleaned their teeth, and they aren't reaching the communication milestones that mean they can really be happy and healthy at school. So, and they can learn. And we know that once that happens, once they reach about the age of 5, that is going to continue for the whole of the rest of their lives. So if we're looking at early intervention, if we're looking at prevention, we've got a real issue with that double hump. So we have to work with people who are already really at the point where those inequalities have done their worst, but also try and prevent that from happening in future generations. And I think that's why it's really important to have an asset-based, and not just to give up, because that would be really easy, but to have an asset-based approach. So really focusing on what's right with people, not what's wrong with them, focusing on communities, what's there, what can we build on, focus on wellness, not illness, and the creation of health, whilst also addressing ill health. And I'm sure we all know in this room that often we equate age with illness, and that's not what creative health is just about. It's about older, happy people who are living your best life, essentially. So yeah.
So this is the thing that we're all secretly asking ourselves. We've touched on it already. But around sustainability, it's a big question. It's a hard question. It's more than money. It's people, it's buy-in, it's personal investment as well as financial investment. And when you know it works, sometimes it's challenging to get additional support to keep that work going. Particularly in the UK, creative and cultural investment tends to be new, shiny, extra things, not the things that we know work day in, day out. I'm guessing for you, Veronda, there's lots of issues around disinvestment or challenges around political investment or support. And also, Tom, it's sort of thinking about technology is just evolving. It's, where are you placing your bets in terms of what's next in technology, and how are people going to, there's a big thing around AI and all of those kind of really difficult conundrums. So I'm not going to pretend to have any of the answers. I'm going to ask you to give me your thoughts on what sustainability looks like in your sector, and perhaps some creative ways that you look at that and how you manage that in your sectors. So perhaps, Veronda, if I come to you first.
Well, it's interesting. I as I've mentioned previously, I think sustainability starts with partnerships. And I was, had I got myself together to get a slide in, I was reading about cooperation, which I think I'm pronouncing, this idea of sometimes we're cooperating, but there's potential of competition because we're in the same industry, and there's what's the Venn diagram. And I think in coming together to partner, to really get that stuff on the table, to figure out who's going to do what, and ask the hard questions and pain points. For example, I like to, when we partner with, especially with organizations that are not other libraries, to hear their pain points. And then a lot of times they're like, we don't have a space to do that. Well, my people have space for days. And even try to leverage those politicos who may or may not have certain feelings about what books we let everyone read, which is their other human right. Giving them maybe a little shine at our meetings to kind of see if we could, play to their egos is a thing I love to do myself. So don't even get me started how I've had to grin and bear it to do that. But if it gets more people connected to resources, I'm here for it. So those are the kinds of things, is really asking the hard questions and not just having, and I would say also kind of identifying, I've been trying to do a tiny bit of learning design thinking, creating stakeholder maps, and looking at the ecosystem around, so you can identify resources and who does what, and bringing, libraries are great partners to bring folks together around that, to connect to one another and kind of get ahead of the time when money's tight. I always say the worst time is to ask for money is when you need it. So to always know who's got it and when are they going to give it to you. But don't tell anyone I said that. Thank you.
You crack me up, and because it's true. It's funny because it's true. And I hear a lot of people talking about, I guess some of what echoes with me is that idea of being almost like a translator, is actually kind of trying to step into the shoes of each of your partners and really understanding their values, their voice, their language, and how you can kind of navigate through that. I don't have the answer to it, but one question you were talking was just when do we get to stop doing this? And it just becomes mainstream, but that's for another day. So Tom, do you want to come in on that, sort of what sustainability looks like from your perspective?
Sure. In terms of, this is probably the question that's closest to heart for me in the work I do. And if somebody ever said, like, why are you successful? It's because I love entrepreneurship, and I'm interested. I'm good at that. That's the thing that, that's my special, whatever they call it, your superpower. And it comes from, I think about the organization as an entrepreneurship project. And so we are constantly looking for ways to bring in resources and create things like, we use a lot of business terms here at the work we do. We talk about market share. We just had a meeting at the office yesterday where people were talking about how do we develop a stronger marketing plan so that we're the sort of first to mind of for customers coming in, which of course are older people from across America that are taking a free class, but we think of them in the same way that a business might, because we need to create a model that's sustainable. Now, our strategy was not to charge. And so when we went to our first programs, people said, how can you keep this thing going if you're going to do it for free? Not only don't we charge the seniors who take the programs, but we don't charge our partners. So we've got partners all over America, 260 partners that we're sending money to them when we get funding. We don't take money from them because we're trying to get to scale. And so when we think about sustainability, it's really about we use a strategy, which is to say, become the dominant feature out in the marketplace for people that are trying to access tech and aging, or at least one of the dominant groups that's really present for people. And then you have value to add, right? Then if you call up a big telecommunications company, or there's a politician running for mayor, they want you because you've got 10,000 people in your system that know what's going on and that are going to learn about something and get connected to it. And older adults vote, and older adults are consumers and an economic force. And so we've leveraged those tools to grow over the years. Our budget now is around $18 million a year. When AARP, which is the largest membership organization in the country, wanted to affiliate with a nonprofit, they picked 2 nonprofits, and we were one of them because we were on the radar doing this kind of work. And but we're relentless about it. When we were talking earlier about getting a tattoo, I have, my typical New York City hipster tattoos here, but we have an ongoing joke at the office about when am I actually going to get the logo of our organization tattooed on me, because it's that we're so passionate about the organization as an entity. We're just always trying to think about how to make it more sustainable. And one last thing is that it's not linear. Rhonda's point about when you need the money and you're asking for it, you're almost never in the right place at the right time. So you have to be building that capacity wherever you have those opportunities. And we're agile. We raise money in New York, which is a really high value environment, but we're also off in Miami because partly it's a city with a huge amount of economic growth and investment in our sector. We went to Texas because there's a lot of resources there where you can get access to things. And we're constantly trying to find those places where we can shift the environment and add to the resources. So it is a constant, I would say, effort. I'm not sure I would call it a battle, because if it's not fun and you don't feel like it's an enjoyable process, then it's hard to get up in the morning when you're tired and you've got other things that are pressing on you and write a fundraising proposal or call some donor. It has to feel kind of like a little bit of a game to us. And I try to stay cheerful about it. We get turned down every day, so how do you turn around and come back and keep going at it, when somebody that you really needed isn't helping you? And we need to be able to keep the emotional positivity about it, which is part of the game.
Mm-hmm. And I was having a conversation yesterday about a similar thing, about this kind of starting with why, that if you can get your why, why you're doing this, the passion really crystallized for you and your team, and then you can support others to buy into your why of why you're doing what you're doing, why it's so important. Julie, I want to come to you, bearing in mind that I know within the health service, there are zero, there's none of this. There's no sort of magic sponsorship or huge investments to be made. And things have to be free at the point of contact because people just don't have money to access. The people that need it the most just don't have the money. And the ethos of our health service in the UK is about entry points to be free or equitable for everybody. So I just wanted to talk to you about, what does sustainability look like for you? Does it even exist? Is it about hearts and minds rather than financial investment? Just what's your perspective?
Yeah, I wish I knew the answer to that. It's the biggest challenge that we have. But I think what we need in the UK, within the health sector, what we need to be is bolder, because we know that our work makes savings to budgets, but what we can't do is make cashable savings. So we're never going to save if we slow down or prevent somebody going to an emergency department, which is going to save thousands of pounds to that hospital trust. no one's ever going to see that money, and the creative health intervention that did that is never going to see that money. So it's not cashable, but it's the right thing to do. So what we have to do is think about things as a whole system, and but that's why it's quite an exciting time in the UK, because we have integrated care systems now. So health and social care has come together. We have decision-making powers at a sort of local level. For us, it's at a GM level. And Greater Manchester, we have devolved health budgets. So we make our own decisions, but we're still siloed into primary and secondary care. So the money that goes to a hospital trust, your population health, public health colleagues are never going to see that money. So it's still, we're not working as a whole system, and that's what the challenge is. But it's not just for us, it's for everybody who's working in early intervention and prevention. But we have a project in Greater Manchester, which some people on the call will be aware of. So the Manchester Camerata Music in Mind programme, which works with people with dementia, and they have some great PhD students, doctoral students on that programme, and they can prove beyond doubt that their projects save money to care homes and to the health system because they reduce agitation. And agitation costs a lot of money, and they can reduce, I can't remember, I don't have the figures to hand. I thought I did, but I don't. But they can make thousands of pounds worth of savings to the health system by doing music sessions with people. And this is real cash savings. And so we've got to shout louder about that kind of work that we can do. But also we need to think about those other savings, notional savings. So we know that loneliness is a cause of early and preventable death. And we know that it's the equivalent of smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Now, imagine the amount of money that is poured into anti-smoking campaigns. Why are we not investing the same amount of money into programs that support people to address loneliness and isolation? That's what we should be doing. And creativity is an absolutely core, central way to address isolation and loneliness. There's a thread through. We're just not doing it at the moment.
Mm-hmm. And I think what echoes back at the end of this is lots and lots of different sound bites that we need to capture and share, but also that this kind of international learning from one another is about amplifying one another's voices, the learning, the research, the support that we've got in different countries, the models. We need to get to the point where, like I said to Veronda slightly earlier, where we don't have to do this anymore, that people value it, that they see it, that they believe in it, that Tom doesn't have to get the knockback every day from the investment, that we don't have to keep on making the case and getting researchers in to prove things over and over and over again. You know, we don't need to be an older person to see it works. But when we do become an older person, we know it works as well. So all of us, no matter where we are in the world or what projects are working on, it's about changing hearts and minds as much as it is about getting investment or partners or building relationships. And I think some kind of international summit like we're in today is such an amazing way of sharing all of that and bringing a little bit of focus to our cause, which we're normally in our day jobs getting along without being seen as much as we should be.
For more information about the 2023 International Creative Aging Summit and to download our summit resource guide, please visit www.lifetimearts.org/ICAS-2023. And be sure to check out Lifetime Arts professional development resources and services linked in the description below.